Morning. I should just say right at the beginning of this video, this one's going to be different. I know it's going to be different because that's why I'm here. Today is to talk about something that is impossible to talk about without getting a little upset. So if you don't want to be upset, don't watch this. Yeah, if you don't need that in your life right now, move along. Um, yeah, I'm going to talk about war a little more directly. Been talking about religion and peace and war and dark and light forces. Yeah, I haven't just straight up given my opinion and talked about the war in the Middle East and specifically what's going on with Israel and Gaza and all the ramifications around that. This land, we all know, is disputed territory. It's always been that way. I don't know if you go back in history, most land is disputed territory. So it's not like this particular land is the only land that we fight over for all sorts of just simple human reasons and also religious reasons. But there's something special about this land, and what makes it so special is just how much claim there is to that land, strongly held claim to the land. In our country, it feels a little simpler, like that's been settled. I don't think that's been settled. I think there's still a lot of fight over the land and land rights and human rights on the land. So we have our own issues around that in the United States, but in the Middle East things are hotter. It's hard to figure out exactly how to explain all of that in a concise way, but if you just take some dates, we're in 2025 right now. The last time there were extremely hot wars going on, before this sort of 1945 to 2025 time, these 80 years. It's not like this is the first fight over that land. You go back to World War One. Before that, this land was controlled by an empire. Ottomans were at the end of the Ottoman Empire. That goes all the way back to the time of the Crusades. This back and forth. You hear about the Crusades and it's like, that's ancient history. It doesn't apply. It was a fight for the land. Christians, Muslims fighting over who would control Jerusalem and the surrounding areas, and what it meant to have a foothold in that area versus total control of that area. It was very difficult to ever get to a place where there was total control by one side. It's usually a fight between warring factions, and one just has a little more strength than the other, and then things shift and it goes back and forth. Go back to the time of Jesus. The Jewish people were still firmly placed in the Holy Land, but Rome was there to sort of govern, and they were the overseers of that land. Before that, there were Greeks. That was Alexander the Great and his expansion of the Greek or the Macedonian Empire in a very fast campaign. Greece took large pieces of what was the Persian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire, took over large portions of that. What's now Turkey, that was all Asia Minor. That was former Greek cities and states that had been conquered by Persia. Um, so you had Egypt down south that had been um, independent, but also had gone through shifting control back and forth. But these Greeks taking over part of the Persian Empire, the Persians that were there before, they had taken over more and more land from groups like the Babylonians and the Assyrians, and eventually up north and west into Asia Minor, into what's now Turkey. That the Persians conquered all that land. Before that, up there, you get back into the semi-real, semi-mythical history of the Greek people. You start getting into stories around Troy. You hear about the Battle for Troy, Helen of Troy, all of that story. That history turns out to be true. A lot of people thought Troy was just this made-up city as a part of a mythical story. Turns out archaeologists found Troy, and turns out that was real. Sure, that was an embellished story by the time it made it into the historical narrative for Greece. There was a lot of fluff that was added to that. But I say that just to basically say thousands of years of back and forth, empires conquering, moving west, moving east. Israel is right in the middle of all of that, and it still is. You have the West, and then you have what is the Middle East, which is a predominantly Muslim area. It's controlled by different factions, and there's different leaders, and now there are states instead of empires that are controlling different pieces of that. We have very strong ties with certain partners in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia really is the most important state in the Middle East. It is the ancestral home of Islam. It is the spiritual center of Islam. The two holiest sites of Islam are in Saudi Arabia, and this third holiest site for Islam is Jerusalem. So to think that land is owned or controlled or should be controlled by one religion or one people group. I'm sure every people group that's ever been associated with that area wants to feel that way, wants to have that control. But it's clearly an unsettled question who really has a right to that land. Going back to the time of Jesus, that was 30 to 35 A.D. When Jesus dies. After the death of Jesus, you don't hear a lot about it in church. You don't hear a lot about it in the Bible. You hear a little about what the apostles go off to do, and you can kind of pick up just on the fringe. You can pick up a little bit of what's happening. But within 40 years of the death of Jesus, Jerusalem falls. Jerusalem falls through a failed revolt. There's a Jewish revolt against the Romans to take back more power and control, and to push the Romans out. That revolt failed, and the temple was destroyed. You can't really understand what that means today. What that would have meant then, we can talk about it as a story and try try to empathize and try to put ourselves into that picture, but you can't really think about that in modern terms unless you think about things like, destroying Mecca, and, tearing down the Kaaba, this central point of all of Islam, where Muslims pray multiple times a day with their literal bodies directed at this centralized point. 2 billion people around the world all focusing their attention to one place. It would be comparable to that. That's what happened in 70, 80 to the Jewish people and to their religion. The people didn't leave right away. They weren't all exiled right away. There was hope for peace again. But within another 60 years, there was another revolt to try again, to take back control. A very, very angry people were not just going to let things go because they had their temple destroyed. They were still fighting to take back control of their land. And by that time, what it meant to be a Jew versus what it meant to be a Christian versus what it meant to be an ally of those people, it wasn't just like everybody who was fighting in that revolt was a devout Jew. There would have been believers in Jesus and Greeks and people that had immigrated to this land from other areas that would have been a part of that, trying to regain a sense of control in that area. And that revolt failed. It's the Bar Kokhba, I think is how you say that. I think that's the revolt in like 130 AD. And the Romans at that point said, fine, we're going to beat you again, and we're going to break you this time. And the city of Jerusalem was completely destroyed, and everybody was exiled. There was no Jerusalem. Jerusalem was wiped off the map. The Romans built their own city there, forget the name of it, but the idea was to completely eliminate anyone from that area that wanted to claim to it, other than some Roman settlers that were going to set up camp and build a new city for themselves there. So yeah, that's a little bit of the history of that area. I think I talked about just we're in a time where we're playing out our own piece of the story of history, and when it comes to the Middle East and Israel specifically, it's just another piece of the story. It's another part of the history. For the last 80 years, the Jewish people have been reestablishing presence in their ancestral homeland. They've been doing that with political support of other nation states that want to help them build a land for their people. But they also see that this isn't open land. This is land where other people are currently living, and some of those people, it's their ancestral land now. They've lived there for generations. There's farmers, there's business people that have built their lives there, and what's happened over the past few decades is more and more of these disputed areas where maybe the governments of the world haven't said the Jews have a right to these areas. They're very close, and sometimes there isn't something as simple as a straight line on a map that says, well, you stay on this side and you stay on this side. So there are large portions of Israel that are currently disputed areas, and Israel continues to move settlers into these areas. Some settlers are Americans, Jewish Americans who want to return to the homeland, can work with the government of Israel to establish residence and have a new home. And over the past few decades, those homes have been taken from from Palestinians who live there currently. Um, they've just been forced off their land and said, this isn't your land anymore, it's ours. It's very similar to how the United States was established and what we did to the native people here as we continue to grab more and more land and more control and use all sorts of things, whether it's relationships with other nation states, like the Louisiana Purchase from the French, that's, we bought that land. That's our land now, and we're going to move these new American settlers into this new land that we purchased. But it's not like the French went around to all the tribes in that area and said, "Hey, just so you know, we're gonna sell your land to these white settlers in the east. They'd like to move and expand out this way, so we're gonna sell them your ancestral land." So there were these agreements between nation states that were completely they were made without the approval of the people who live on that land, and that's what we've seen with the Palestinian people too. More and more, their land has been granted either through formal agreements between states or just through alliances and political and military support that allow them to continue to expand into these other areas. So this is going to continue in the land of Israel and Palestine. This will not stop. Whether we have a Republican president or a Democrat president, or whether Netanyahu is the prime minister of Israel or it's someone else, this is not going to stop. It's not about the individuals who are in charge causing this problem. This is a problem that is a conflict that's thousands of years old. So what do we do about it? You don't have to pick a winner. You don't have to pick a side. This isn't a pro-Israel versus pro-Palestine discussion. It's a human discussion. How should humans be treated? What kind of rights should you have to the land that you've lived on and cultivated and built a life around? What is your right to that land? That's a very human thing. How are the humans treated? The stronger and the weaker forces are going to be in conflict with each other. The weaker forces are not going to just roll over and say, "Yeah, you're right. You want this land? It's yours. We'll get out of the way and go find somewhere else." It simply will not happen, and it's not because Palestinians are bad guys and Israelis are good guys. It's way more complicated than that, and I don't think it's hard to shift your mind from this very simple, like, I support these people because those are the ones I told are the good guys. It's not a hard shift just to go to a place in your mind where you think about people as people. These are human beings, and a human being who's 10th generation living on a piece of land that's been in their family, that they use to feed their family. That human being isn't a bad guy. His wife, his children, they are not terrorists. These are not terrorists. These are not evil people. These are human beings. If collectively, within all of those people, you are going to find warriors who see what's happening to their people and will fight back. That's within all people groups. There's a warrior class within the people group who takes up arms and fights back. And within the Palestinian people group, you have a group that's done that. That people group has been deemed a terrorist organization, and I'm certain they do things that are creating terror for Israelis that live on other sides of the line. That group of of warriors that are convinced they're doing what's right for their people are going to do whatever they can with their resources to fight back. So regardless of a ceasefire or any agreements that are made, there will continue to be people in the Palestinian world who feel like they have to fight. If they don't fight, they will be wiped out. This is what has happened all throughout history. It doesn't make them exceptionally evil people or anything outside the norm. That is normal human behavior of a group that is weaker than this other group, and that's being wiped out. So I want to see an end to conflict, and I'm also certain that conflict will not end. So I think it's okay to speak up and try to explain things with a little more depth, without picking a winner or loser. But just like the wars that we've been involved in as Americans all around the world, sometimes there are things that we have done that are just inexcusable. What we've done during the War on Terror when it comes to torture, it's becoming easier to talk about that now that legal cases and people that are involved in programs that push back against these programs during the Iraq War, during our time in Afghanistan, what we did with prisoners of war, how we captured them, how we treated them. That's all starting to come out now. So if we can just look at ourselves and say, okay, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? Where did we cross the line? And how do we do better? I think we have to hold ourselves to account, and we have to hold the people within our government to account for the things that they've done wrong, that are illegal, that are against American law, that are against international law, and just against the basic human law about how we should treat people. And I believe that needs to happen with all the other countries around the world. If you violate these laws and you use war as an excuse, or terror as an excuse, or revenge, however you want to dress that up in a speech, there should be consequences for your actions, and that's how we define right and wrong. And accountability is absolutely necessary, or law will not be followed. So we've given the world kind of a blank check on bad behavior because of our lack of accountability and our lack of commitment to our own values and our own beliefs in these theaters of war. So we can do better, but there's accountability that needs to take place, and that doesn't just happen because a bunch of people in Washington wake up one day and they're like, you know what, we really need to hold our bad actors accountable and break down these existing structures that allow these things to happen and clean house. That doesn't happen without enormous pressure from the people. So I think there's some things we can do at home to get our own house in order, and doing those things at home maybe gives us a chance to see some of the things that are happening around the world come to an end. Because if the people on the ground in the Israel-Palestine conflict were really afraid of being held accountable for things like atrocities and genocide or ethnic cleansing, if there was legitimate fear that you were going to have to answer for those actions, I think you'd think twice about breaking ceasefires creating just another reason to kill innocent people, because it forwards your agenda. We have to do better. So speak up. If you're a Christian, pray on it. Look at your Bible, Old and New Testament. Old Testament can give you an idea of the type of conviction that commitment to a religious ideology that includes rights to land. It can give you a very clear picture of how that plays out. Read some American history about the settlement of the West and what that really meant. There was a lot of deception, a lot of lies, and a lot of blood spilled. So let's all learn a little bit more about how these things happen, what happens along the way, what things are excused just to advance an agenda, and maybe try to do a little bit better. Learn more, speak up. That's where I'm at, learning more and speaking up. Let's talk about it if you want to know more. That's these videos will never be long enough to cover everything, so hopefully that gets enough of the broad strokes that we can maybe have a dialogue about some of that.